Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with the Average Joe Sports Show. Everyone's favorite former non-conference teams coming to town Saturday.
I'm Gary Sharp, and will Nebraska's O score?
Hi, I'm Bill Doleman. Will Nebraska end up in the end zone or the friend zone on Saturday?
And it's Elijah Herbel here. We'll wrap this show with our standard. We'll take a look around the Big Ten and predict the weekend slate of games. That's on the Average Joe Sports Show.
Welcome to it. It's episode 66 of the Average Joe Sports Show. Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Like and subscribe. YouTube, where you find us, the Average Joe Sports Show. Spotify, iTunes. Subscribe to the audio portion. Like, subscribe, review. And fellas, on to November. We're going to drop this here probably around Halloween. I'm going as a middle-aged husband. Sweatpants and sweatshirt. Whiskey's off to the left. It's midweek. Let's get after it. The Bruins are here. Do we hear a roar? Do we hear an Aikman shout-out? Gaston Green?
Oh, how about Dana Brinson in the 88 game of the Rose Bowl? One of the hardest hits ever in the history of college football.
I really was not down.
I really think with what they've got going with Pepper Rogers and Gary Beeman, that UCLA has a formidable attack against with Jerry Robinson defensively. That's a pretty tough team that the Bruins have coming in. Mark Harmon backing up the quarterback. Could be quite the game.
I was checking here on our old radio equipment from like 1990 something to see if we had the sound of a roar, and we unfortunately do not. I looked through the archives and there's nothing there. So unfortunately, no cool sound effects. But yes, UCLA week.
Hey, there's a connection with UCLA. I mean, like interesting moments in Nebraska football history has surrounded UCLA. When they were playing, home and homes in the 80s, and then in 12 and 13. It was the first game that Husker Vision ever had was UCLA. It was an uncomfortable 48 hours for Bo Pelini after blowing a halftime lead against UCLA because Tommy Frazier came out against him, and then Deadspin came out against him a couple of days later.
That was a little rough. It was interesting. That's the last UCLA game in Lincoln was the 2013 throwback. And I shouldn't even say throwback, but the black jerseys, the alternate uniforms. Yeah. Nebraska was murdering UCLA 21-3. And then the Bruins rip off, 38 straight points. It was a little rough. A play before halftime. Sharpie, you and I were sitting in the press box.
Yeah.
I think it was either Randy Gregory or Avery Moss misses a tackle on third down, and then the avalanche happened. I got to interview Jim Mora after the game, and he was in disbelief. I was like, dude, why are you taking your belt off? You won. He was in the locker room, and it was one of those games. Those were two games, right? The beginning of the Mora era in 12 where Nebraska lost and dropped one on the road early in the year. Shouldn't have.
That was the worst one.
Yeah, that 12 team went on to play in the Big Ten championship game. The 13 team had no business losing that. UCLA's pretty good. The rule of thumb is you always want to get UCLA early, apparently, versus late. We'll see what this 2-5 team actually is.
I don't think there will be a repeat of those performances on Saturday.
Well, and to be fair, the 12 loss was worse than the 13 loss because, if I remember correctly, it's like a true fact. I'm pretty sure UCLA, one of the members of their team, had tragically died the night before that game against Nebraska. Flowers, and like a team that's going through the emotional ringer such as that. Like that was one of those games where I remember sitting back and being like, can't even be disappointed that Nebraska lost this one because it's such a great story with UCLA and it's something that their team really needed at the time. I forgave Nebraska pretty quickly for that loss because you know what? That's a tough place to be. The 12 game though, that one sucked.
That was a bad early season loss. We may need to talk forgiveness if it doesn't go the right way Sunday morning. Because,
well, I mean, the honesty of this Saturday is these are the kind of games that, like, the defense swarms the opponent if you look at what UCLA does or doesn't do well. But the fallout from losing to UCLA would be so much greater than the fallout from getting beat 56-7. And you'd have to sit on it for a week during the bye before you go to USC. And then it would be, well, Rule is 0-7 now when trying to become bowl eligible. That's why I think it's so important for Nebraska just to win, to get to 6, get to the bye week, and then, a wide range of outcomes could happen. But I don't want to say it's a must win, but man, I think it's pretty damn close to being a must win Saturday.
It does feel like last year, Maryland and Iowa at the end of November. Nebraska had that, but they were sitting there with 5 wins. And you're just thinking, well, it's going to happen this week, and it didn't happen. Well, this week, and it didn't happen. And then you're going, well, surely they can beat Maryland. And then that didn't happen. And then nobody, I think, really thought Nebraska was going to be that, in that position against Iowa, even though they had, their issues with the offensive coordinator last year. But to come that close and lose to Iowa, that was painful. But Nebraska felt pressure going into Maryland that was the game they had to win, and that was at the end of the month. Now you're at the beginning of November, and I think they're feeling it maybe a little bit, maybe not as much as if they have gotten blown out by Indiana and blown out by Ohio State. I think they're coming back to Lincoln to play this game with some confidence that maybe they have righted things. No, they didn't get the win, but maybe they should have. And short of a Sunday morning apology or Monday apology, maybe they should have really won that game. But I do get a sense that right now that there's a pressure there that feels like it was a year ago. Well, at the end of the month.
To me, this game, and Ty Robinson kind of made the comparison at his presser earlier this week. Loved Ty, what he had to say today, or yesterday, I should say, Tuesday was whenever he spoke. It feels a lot like last year's Michigan State game. The only difference being you're at home, and that you got a lot of good feelings. Like Nebraska, I know the result didn't go the way you wanted against Ohio State, but you feel good coming off of that. Last year, you felt good about your month of October. You were 3-0. Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, you get the wins. And then you see that game to kick off the month that is you should win. You should have gone out and been the better team against Michigan State. You should, if you go out and execute, be the better team against UCLA on Saturday. You didn't get it done. It sets you up for 3 games with Maryland, Wisconsin, and Iowa that were all winnable, but you wouldn't have put any of them in the should-win category, at least in my opinion, last year. Kind of feels the same way this year, where you have the game you should win against UCLA to get to 6, and then you have the 3 games following that with USC, Wisconsin, Iowa. You say, all those are winnable football games. I don't think you put any of them in the you should win this football game category. They're all could win, toss-up type games. You want to get that 6 this time around because of the way that Nebraska just felt so hungover after that Michigan State game last year. The way they let that affect them, dropping a game that they should have won. This is that game this year. UCLA is the game you should win to set up your month of November. Can they go do it?
I'm interested to see this progress continue. Defense looked like they should look, right? They played a really good football game. Not perfect, but good enough to get the win for you, holding Ohio State to 21 points. What kind of progress do we continue to see from the offense? Does Dylan find, some of those deeper throws if they do go vertical? Does he complete some of those? Are his legs more of a factor, not necessarily a called factor, but an improv? And then can you get the run game going? And I know UCLA is pretty good against the run, so what happens in the passing game? Do they keep trying those damn short game passes, and does it finally pay off? I don't know. But that's where I'm interested in. I think the special teams, do you trust them? Probably not. But do you feel better about it? Yeah, with special teams you do. At least you have something to build on. Back to that confidence word from last week. You can not be empty in the red zone. But what can you do? Can you hit some explosives so it's not always got to be a 7, 8, 9 play drive to find any points? I mean, that's where I'm at with this football team as they strive to complement all 3 phases. And it wasn't good enough last Saturday, but it was better against a big-time opponent.
Isn't And we kind of talked about this on Sunday. Isn't that who Nebraska is that played on Saturday? Good, not great, but when they play hard and their defense keeps them in the game, they've got a shot. As long as the other team doesn't seize some of the opportunities that are given them, I think a lot will be determined on who Nebraska is playing over the next 4 games, on how you feel about them, because I haven't seen anything that says, man, that's an improved football team. Because I will say I'm pretty confident the Indiana game was an outlier for the defense. Saturday in Columbus was what that defense can do, but yet they still had some holes. But they're a good enough defense that'll give you a chance to win football games, and also a team that didn't get hardly any credit for, staying in a game against Ohio State and Columbus. So I think they are who they are. That's not necessarily a good thing. I think what I'm looking for in progress in the last month doesn't necessarily have to do with the side of the ball. I think it's important for Nebraska going into the season, because this time, a month from today, the regular season is over and we're on to portal season. And we're on to decisions that will impact, the 2025 season. I want to see young guys make the next step. The Barneys, the Nelsons, the Fedonis, guys that have the ability to return in 25, they solidify their starting spots over the next month. Because this might be a more in-depth thing to down the road, but if you had to look at guys that will start against UCLA that have the ability to come back next year, how many of those jobs are guaranteed that whatever Nebraska does with high school recruiting or in the portal or the competition behind you, they're not going to lose their job? I mean, the one definite is the guy that's spinning the ball. But I want to see the young guys make progress. Like the freshmen, the redshirt freshmen, even some sophomores, where the month ends with a little bit of momentum and you go, okay, we didn't just kind of 500 our way to a bowl game in the last month. We had some momentum, feel good. Let's go to the bowl game, and then let's look and see what these guys can do once we get to spring and, of course, in 25.
So do you see this being a game where those who have 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters to play and preserve a red shirt, that maybe they start to play not garbage time snaps at the end of what should be, I would think, a comfortable win? Do you foresee some of these younger players, red shirts, projected red shirts, that they will play and do their audition, that this is their opportunity in a game like this? Yeah, you may not play against Iowa. What do we have? 5 more games, whatever. But this is the day that it's at home, comfortable environment. I'm one who believes that Kalen should have gotten some snaps at Indiana and then put him back on the red shirt shelf or in the red shirt closet. But do you think that there might be some guys we haven't seen who will get meaningful snaps on Saturday?
Well, I think it's definitely a possibility. Some of those guys, are still only going to play due to injury. That's why this game is if you could get it to be like a 35-13 game where guys at least get on the field. Okay, so you have some tape on them. Maybe they get 8 to 10 snaps. Right. That would be ideal. But I don't see anybody like emerging and knocking somebody out in the top 2, but maybe they show up on special teams at least to get their feet wet, But yeah, if you had a nice comfortable game where in the fourth quarter you're not playing Dylan and you try and play 65 of your 74 that would dress for a Big Ten game, I think that would be fantastic to go into a bye that way.
Well, you said the key word, and it's been the word of this season, right? Has been momentum. How did Nebraska line things up to start the year? You've had a hiccup or two. You've had some adversity. You've responded to some adversity finally with the Ohio State game. And now you get a chance to maybe put a knife into some of that doubt or adversity with achieving why all these 6-year COVID guys came back, is to get Nebraska right and get to a bowl game. And I think the fan base is going to just let out a cheer in unison if the score is the right way for Nebraska fans at the end of the ball game. I mean, you've exercised the demon. It is Halloween tomorrow, and you get to be like about everybody else that's competent in college football, and that's postseason football.
Well, and you kind of hit it with the momentum. Like the story of Nebraska's season to me has been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's been what this season has been, where you get through the non-conference, you have that progress report game against Colorado, you got good feelings, then, oh, here's the step back with the Illinois game where you're not as good as you think you are. Make a couple steps back forward. I mean, you get a win against Purdue where it's Matt Rule saying that could have been a close game, but you made it a not close game. And then Rutgers, which was a close football game, your defense steps up late. You're feeling good going into the bye. Here comes Indiana with the step back. I think Ohio State, considering they're a top 5 team, it's a step forward. That's like kind of what I'm wanting to see over these last 3 games is, can you continue that forward progress? Because you preach the process. I think the heart of the process is the fact that if you commit to your process, it doesn't matter what's happening externally. You're going to keep on taking steps forward in the right direction. I don't think you've necessarily seen that all this season. That's kind of what the question is to me, is do you continue that same story of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or do you continue that forward progress through UCLA into your bye, and then USC, Wisconsin, Iowa coming up? Can you continue that forward progress through the tail end of your season?
Yeah, I think that's important because, I think we all kind of look at the month of November and say, well, 2-2. Well, I mean, Wisconsin and Iowa get a lot of run where, I think Nebraska's a good team. And I don't think they're Jekyll and Hyde. I just think they are from week to week. And they need to have a lot of stuff go well for them to win a football game. But they're good enough. But you can't beat UCLA, beat Wisconsin, lose to Iowa, and, hey, we made a bowl game at 7-5. Not poo-pooing a bowl game. Hasn't happened here in a while. But you have to have, that's why I keep going back to the young guys. I think it's an important month for Dylan to get back to the Dylan of September and not the Dylan of October. So you have some momentum rolling with your quarterback, because people need to be attracted outside of the program to what Nebraska's doing. All of a sudden the offense looks fun. Dylan is rolling. Now you can go and convince that offensive lineman or that wide receiver that, hey, did you see what we did in the last month? November to remember. We got the guy cooking. You want to come play with him? How much money do you need? One of those things. So I think it's important. I think the momentum is a huge thing in this last month.
How much money do you need?
It's always been the conversation. It's now just okay to talk out loud about it.
How big of a Happy Meal box do you need under the table? Now it's just like, hey, come on to McDonald's. You got
Here's
the whole
the
franchise.
Take the envelope.
Yeah, you don't even need the envelope. You don't need the envelope anymore. At times I think Nebraska's been 1 step forward, 1 step back, a couple steps sideways, fall down, unconscious, all in the same game.
So it's been a Friday night.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the special teams has been stumbling down O Street and tripping and not getting back up again, Now, Indiana, they all took a collective, 10 steps backward, but not everybody can do the Cotton Eye Joe and then still stay standing. But I look, if this game was not UCLA, now the people talk about Nebraska's brand falling or what. Nebraska's brand is still strong. It's still a big deal. UCLA is the one that has fallen and slid down, and it's not the same UCLA. I was joking earlier about Pepper Rogers and Gary Beeman and Mark Harmon and all those other players. Yeah, that was a perennial top 25 team. And now it's, if they get into the top 25, I forgot UCLA had a football program. If this was not UCLA on the schedule, and you looked at the stats of this game, you could argue UTEP. These are not impressive numbers. And I know they played a tough schedule. I mean, they played Penn State, they played Rutgers, they played Indiana, they played Oregon, was it?
They played Oregon, and then they played
Killer schedule.
Consecutive.
Killer schedule. But they're averaging 2.5 yards per carry. Their quarterbacks have been picked off more than they've thrown touchdown passes. I think it might be 50-50. They've been sacked close to a couple dozen times. This is a football team right now that statistically is not very good. And the reason they're not statistically very good is that it's probably not very good. So And I remember going into this season, people are, oh, UCLA, that's going to be a tough game. They wanted to fire Chip Kelly last year because he wasn't doing the job. He got out of L.A., and they give it to Deshaun Foster, a legendary UCLA player, right? And they bring in Eric Bieniemy. But right now, this UCLA football team is not very good. And just based on looking at their offensive numbers, this is a game that Nebraska's defense should absolutely dominate and crush. And it might be 14-3, but it ain't going to be that close. If Nebraska does defensively to UCLA what it did against Ohio State, this is not even close. And Nebraska's offense can stumble and stagger and maybe skin a knee. But I don't look at this UCLA team as being terribly formidable.
First team to 10 on Saturday is kind of joking.
Well, especially given the rain that's in the forecast right now.
Yep.
You never know.
Doleman, were you on the road trip? We'll stay with this UCLA-Nebraska theme. Were you on the road trip in '93 out there?
I don't.
Were you around the infamous Bob Devaney Sunset Strip off the record story?
Well, not that one, but no, I don't think I went out to that game that year.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I was fishing to see if there was confirmation on Bob had to go, and apparently he had to go on Sunset Strip.
Never heard this one before.
I think we need to talk about this a little bit more.
We have a common friend.
Okay.
That was out on that trip in '93. And the urban legend is they were out on Sunset after the game. And I think that was a 2:30 kickoff. Trev had a monster game that day. LP went off and Nebraska won 14-13. But it might have been the Friday night before instead of the Saturday. Anywho, Bob, I may even get my years messed up, 93 or 88. Either way, Bob was out there and there was not a porta potty available.
So you're saying he treated Sunset Strip like Ozzy Osbourne treated the Alamo?
Pretty much.
Well, this brings me back to...
Probably wasn't the only one.
No, absolutely not. I'm sure Vince and
was Bob at the whiskey or something, listening to Motley Crue or rap or what?
I don't know. 88 would have been more impressive than 93, but yeah.
I think my 88 might sound better. I think by 93, Bob had slowed down a bit.
Yeah, because he was, it might have been 88, but it's still a mutual friend of all of ours. He had to go. He had to go.
Look, I drove Bob around a lot when he was in Lincoln. I never drove him, drove him around L.A. listening to the Doors' L.A. Woman or anything, so no.
See, this whole conversation here does bring me back to something Bill said, what was it, about 5 minutes ago, referring to Nebraska's special teams being the guy who's stumbling around on O Street. Like, I was sitting here thinking, and it distracted me because each phase of Nebraska's game is absolutely one of those guys you knew back in college that changed personalities whenever they drank too much. Like, Nebraska's defense is your friend from college that had one too many beers and started wanting to fight people.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Nebraska's offense.
7 or 8 of them right off the top of my head, and usually involved a headbutt.
Well, then sometimes they get too drunk and they're way overconfident and it doesn't go well for them. But I digress. Nebraska's offense is the guy that drinks and goes into the bar with a plan to meet women and then strikes out left and right because they've had too many drinks.
I know dozens of those guys.
No longer works. They have this great plan to talk to the blonde at the end of the bar, and then they're stumbling over their words once they get over there. And then Nebraska's special teams is the guy that doesn't even make it into the bar because they're too drunk and the bouncer says, no, you can't come in tonight.
That's well done. I love that.
I got plenty of time to think about it because I was sitting here like, I hope they don't come to me in a second because I am trying to get this straight in my head.
So is Nebraska's offense ever going to get to the point to be that 10-2 or the 2-10, right?
Well,
that's a $1 million question.
Will they be an offense that will ever score?
Oh, wow.
I mean,
well played.
All these questions.
I mean, sometimes Nebraska's offense operates like they're going along really well and everything is smooth, And then you take off the beer goggles and you're like, whoa. That's what happens when you get to the red zone.
You get the pocket knife out and you just start cutting. Don't need this arm.
Which Nebraska friend is on O Street or something like that?
That Husker offense, they're going for the easy score. They're going for the swing pass to get things in rhythm. And oh no, it's a loss of 3, and you're just thrown off. Your confidence is shot.
Is UCLA that guaranteed yes in the bar?
Is UCLA what we would call a blank blocker?
I knew that was going to come too. Yeah,
and then they get the pick 6, and the next thing you know, your date or what you were trying to work on is going out the door the other way.
And you're headed to Amigos. And you're headed to Amigos to hang out with Sheriff Woody.
I mean, we have great job, Elijah. We have broken this down perfectly about Nebraska's offensive problems.
Well, last week we were talking what kind of car is Nebraska, and
now cars and bars. I mean, yeah. We'll get into some of the Big Ten action this weekend. But really, what do you think about UCLA in this league? All right, they're the one team that's traveled 78 time zones and got a win. So good on them. But is it just going to continue to be a revolving door, or will they stabilize at some point? And be the Terry Donahue at least? All right, they're 8-4, but they're in the Cotton Bowl.
I don't know. I was talking about this today on my show. Like, you used to be able to rattle off at least one player on UCLA's team. Hey, J.J. Stokes.
Anthony Barr.
Yeah, you really can't. And the thing I worry about is they're in this league because USC is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, UCLA could not allow USC to go into the Big Ten and not follow. And they're because they're in the California system. There's some different financial challenges. If the NIL was a lot better in Westwood, I imagine Tony White is bringing his UCLA Bruins in here on Saturday.
Oh, you're right.
He interviewed, but it's pretty well known. They were like, hey, what is the NIL? Is the NIL in Westwood enough for you to get your head above water and make progress? And they couldn't give him a definitive answer. And, I don't know how much further he went down the road, but I don't know. They're in a weird spot because they're a team that, I don't know, has the general feeling, whether you're an older fan or a younger fan, oh, it's just UCLA. They're supposed to be good in football.
They get players.
They do, but the fact is, I mean, they don't have any sustained run of success since Terry Donahue, was out. Mm-hmm. They just don't. They have, like a couple of years ago, Chip Kelly had a really good year, and we were like, okay, now it's starting to work in Westwood. And then he was like, nope, too many challenges here. I don't want to deal with it. They play in a stadium that is legendary, but it's 45 minutes from campus.
Yeah.
It's they've got a lot of challenges that nobody else has in this league. And, that's why when you hire a guy like Deshaun Foster, who is about as chill can be, and will remind you that UCLA is in Los Angeles, I don't know, man. They need an attention grabber. I think they're better than their record because they played good teams, but they don't move the needle like these great UCLA Nebraska games back in the 80s and 90s we've referenced already.
They're just buried. They're buried in that town. They're buried in the NIL. I mean, think of the financial arsenal their rivals have in USC with all of Hollywood's money. I mean, that's where they all went to film school, right? So let's call old Spielberg up or whoever to scratch a check for whoever. So that's what's kind of funny about both the California schools. I mean, SC's a far cry from what they should be, but they're close. They're like Nebraska was, points and losses. Like they're an eyelash from 7-0, but they're sitting at 4-3.
I get that they've had a tough schedule, but I don't think they will have faced a defense as good as Nebraska's. Oregon's good, but to think that they're going to come into Lincoln and play Nebraska's defense, if Nebraska's defense play like it did against Ohio State, and if it's going to be a bad track, I just cannot see how they're going to present a huge challenge in terms of scoring points. Sure, Nebraska might have a problem chasing 3 or 7 or whatever, but I just think that Nebraska's defense could totally dominate this game and give Nebraska's offense or special teams every opportunity to walk through a really, really big door.
But here's the
play I think will.
The one pause on that is UCLA's had a week. They're another team coming off a bye, taking on Nebraska. Bieniemy's incredible as an OC, but does that translate with the amount of time you get with college kids to throw in a few new wrinkles to surprise Nebraska's defense?
This to me isn't about what UCLA, the threat that they pose. It's all about Nebraska's defense. What Nebraska defense comes to play. That's what it's about to me. Like, this Nebraska defense has proven. I mean, do we think that UCLA's offense can be better than Ohio State with the star-studded nature of their roster all over the board offensively? 2 of the best running backs in the country, a 5-star wide receiver, all the way down to like the 8th spot on their depth chart. Great quarterback.
On a perfect day weather-wise. Yeah, I get you.
Like, it's not about what UCLA's offense, the threat they pose to Nebraska's defense. It's all about what Nebraska defense do we see. Do we see that defense that came out against Illinois and against Indiana, or do you see that defense that came out against Colorado, the defense that came to play against Ohio State? Like, what Husker defense do you see on Saturday? That's the ultimate question to me, because we know whenever the Husker defense is on their day, they're a top 10 unit. They're a unit that can hold this UCLA offense probably less than 10 points if they're on their day. It's as simple as that. It's not about what Bieniemy has up his sleeve. It's not about UCLA and what their offense can do with Garber and whoever. Like, can't even name any guy in their offense. It's all about what Husker defense shows up on Saturday. That's what it is.
Create havoc. I mean, Nebraska, when Nebraska defensively gets pressure on the quarterback and they have an abundance of havoc plays, they look like a top 10 defense. I also don't think UCLA has enough parts to stress Nebraska's deficiencies on defense. Like, they don't have somebody that would put, Isaac Gifford in a bad situation like Ohio State did. Ohio State has an elite play caller. They have elite wide receivers. They design a play where they catch the most important defensive guy for Nebraska, not turning his hips the right way, and the next thing you can score. UCLA doesn't have that.
No, I think it comes down to Tony White. And he said we need to play with a chip on our shoulder. Well, a cliche. But to play a little angry, like they, and they're at home. I just think, Nebraska's defense is it. And getting back to the shortcomings at UCLA, and Gary, you might know this a little better, but part of UCLA's challenge in the Big Ten is that they have to support the rest of the UC system. And they said, okay, you can go to the Big Ten, because they fought it politically. There was some governmental attempts to stop it, but you can go, but you got to share what's coming out of that pot of gold with everybody else. Is that not correct? That they're not going to get to keep what's theirs. They've got to give it to Cal Berkeley, DC, as well as every other UC school.
Yeah, they had to help out. That was part of when they came into the league. I think another thing, and it's one of those things. It's very rare to be a really, really good basketball and football school. And UCLA, their identity is basketball, and they always will be a basketball school. Purdue will always be a basketball school. Michigan State, always a basketball school, but football has had their moments. I just think there's just a lot of challenges at UCLA, and then you throw them on the West Coast and you ask them to fly across the country or play these other teams. They kind of get exposed. You can kind of hang out in the Pac-12 and people are like, okay. You can't in the Big Ten. So that's why the coaching hire was so mysterious on who? You're doing this again? Why don't you just bring back Carl Durrell? You remember him when he was there?
I do. Don't ask for any Buff references on old Carl. But the old Skippy Neuheisel-led UCLA Bruins from the 1980s, man. I smile. That was probably one of my first Nebraska games as a kid, was that 87 game. It's either that or Arizona State, but I got to both of them. I'm not sure what the order was, but I just remember those gold helmets, man. And they always kind of scared you from time to time when Nebraska played. I remember the Aikman 88 game that you referenced, Sharpie. And it's been a good dance partner for Nebraska. You just hope that Saturday's not that dreaded step back, like you said, Elijah.
Well, it's funny to hear what you guys think of UCLA compared to me and my generation, because they've never been.
You think Foster Farms?
They've never been great. Like what UCLA is to me is a team that can occasionally get themselves a good player or two on their roster, which can get them wins in the Pac-12, get them 7 wins, get them 8 wins. Like you think of Miles Jack, that was probably over a decade ago, where he was racking up 100 yards on the ground and 14 tackles as a linebacker, and then you get to Josh Rosen, who's a great quarterback. Ends up going
easy on that.
Round. He was a great quarterback at UCLA. Let's lay that out. NFL, not so much.
No, I'd even argue with that. But go ahead.
But like that's what it is to me with like UCLA. Is I don't think of any UCLA teams and be like that was a great team. Like I think of great players that played UCLA, but I don't think of them ever constructing a great roster as a whole, top to bottom. During my time, it was always all right. Well, Josh Rosen's got to go throw for 400 yards, or man, Miles Jack's got to be the best player on both defense and offense for UCLA to stand a chance today. Like that's the UCLA I think of in my own head. It's never been, man, UCLA football giant or anything close to it.
I think of this recruiting battle for Ola Dugandaro. He's kind of like supposed to be the next interior tackle, like Sue equivalent. Is Ola still playing in the NFL? That's a good question.
I don't know.
But he played a lot of years in the NFL, and he was really good at UCLA.
Well, you remember Darnay Holmes?
Yeah.
He came, it was Nebraska and UCLA for him.
Good old Darnay.
Ola Dugandaro.
Whatever happened to him? Oh, he ended up getting drafted, didn't he?
Yeah, he's he may still be in the NFL. Most recently, he was with the Giants. I think he still might be in New York. He might be a member of Big Blue.
Easily forgettable then.
Well, it's just like that's the thing is his UCLA, they would have guys and you'd be able to rattle them off. And it was pretty cool because they were the non-con game. And it was like it was that one marquee game on Nebraska's non-con schedule that was like a big deal. It got like national attention. And look at this week, it's relegated to the 2:30 Big Ten Network game. Against a team that's 2-5 against a team that is trying to get bowl eligible. That's just kind of where UCLA is. But these are also the games that if you have a championship mindset, you got to win these games. There's no messing around. You win these football games. You don't even think twice about it. And Nebraska has made the transition where these kind of teams that find themselves in the bottom of the Big Ten, Nebraska has beaten. They've at least overcome that because in the past, they've been knocked off by these type of teams. So at least they have that going for them. But I think another thing about progress is there'll be 3 of the 4 teams possibly that Nebraska will finish with that'll be bowl teams, right? I mean, can you push progress if Nebraska has year 2 of Matt Rule and you only have 1 win over a bowl team, and that's Colorado? Because Rutgers, I think, Rutgers with the remaining schedule now at 4-4, man, they might struggle to become bowl eligible.
The wheels are starting to fall off for that Rutgers team.
I don't think people will care. I think if people look at Nebraska getting to 6 wins, they're not going to look at how they did it. They won't look at where they went. They're just going to know that they got to 6, maybe 7, and that will be, that'll signal progress.
I mean, beating the teams that you're supposed to beat is a step in the right direction.
I don't think Nebraska's in looking for style points, and I don't think anybody really wants to give Nebraska style points at this point. Mike check.
Thank you. I think Wisconsin's gettable, right? So I think in the term of progress, you can't just finish out at 6. I think you got to get more. Maybe I'm being greedy if I'm wearing a Nebraska hat, but I think you match up all right against Wisconsin and Iowa. Is inconsistent as your offense is, your defense is money. SC, who the hell knows? Right?
No kidding.
and then you got UCLA Saturday. So I'm not screaming for 9. I think 8 was what a lot of us all projected. But that even seems, wow, if you get to 8 with this offense. But 7 right now, I think you'd be okay with it. It's got to, they got to play at that Ohio State level. What I mean by that is they got to be in a 4-quarter fight where it was there at the end versus, a missed opportunity getting in your own way, kind of like Illinois for sure. And then you got to show up, unlike Indiana.
7, 8, or 9 will be easier to get than 6. Even though I think Nebraska will have a fairly easy win, it's just the mindset, it's the getting over it, finally, achieving it, getting to the
pressure.
They're going to get to that plateau, like the scenery up here, and now take another step forward. That maybe there is that momentum, and then you've got 6 secured, and now you have the remainder of the schedule. It's not getting 6 secured by sneaking one against Iowa at the end of the regular season and, oh my God, we made it. Now you've got some more games to be played that if you continue to improve and the defense continues to play the way we think it should, it could, and expect, then, okay, we're at 6. Let's go get 7. Let's go get 8, maybe 9. That's kind of crazy talk for some. But I think if they get 6, then they get at least 1, if not 2 more.
Let's get some score predictions. Big Ten weekend, Ohio State, Penn State. Doesn't this just scream Penn State should win this game based on how Ohio State got beat up last week? -3 Buckeyes are still favored. Do you guys have a lean either way?
I think Ohio State looks more like what we expect Ohio State to look like. I think they disrespected Nebraska a ton. I think they overlooked Nebraska coming out of the bye week. They didn't talk much about Nebraska in the week leading up. They overlooked them. Nebraska came to play. Ohio State just has too much in the chamber to, drop a game like that. And they found one extra score. I think they're back to looking like a top 10 team. But will Penn State look like a top 10 team? I think Penn State covers, but this game has come down to the fourth quarter of late. And who do you trust in the fourth quarter? James Franklin, who is 1-9 against Ohio State, or Ryan Day, who I think this is a huge game for him in Buckeye land because there's something not right. Nebraska may have really screwed with Ohio State. I think they'll play well. I think they'll win, but you got to keep an eye on Ohio State moving forward.
Maybe he'll go to UCLA.
This game is...
That's not the SEC, Bill.
This game is in Happy Valley, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it'd feel different to me if it was a night game whiteout.
That's exactly where I was going.
It's an 11 a.m. kick. I think Ohio State has multiple weeks of motivation to take this week extremely serious. I mean, Will Howard talked about the fact that he's always had a chip on his shoulder, the fact that Penn State didn't think he was good enough to be a Nittany Lion. I think he's going to have motivation. I think the team's going to have motivation because last week didn't look how they wanted it to, combined with the fact that you lost one against Oregon. I think Ohio State has more to play for. I think they need to win this game, and I think they do win this football game. I'd probably take the Buckeyes somewhere in a 31-24 type ball game.
All right. I'm going to go against the grain. I think James Franklin actually gets it done. I think Penn State wins. I think Penn State, I'll for sure take Penn State into the 3. But for sure, night game is what this thing should be versus big noon.
I wouldn't be, I will say, I wouldn't be surprised either way, Bill. I didn't mean to jump on you there. But if Penn State wins this game, I wouldn't be surprised. I just think Ohio State probably has more motivation to get this one.
Sure.
I think the non-night game thing is in the heads at Penn State. They were yeah, right. They felt so disrespected by it that they've talked themselves into, we're losing our home field advantage, and this is not what we wanted. We wanted a night game. We wanted a whiteout. All of that they're talking themselves out of any home field advantage that they had. I think they've spooked themselves on Halloween week. So I like Ohio State because I think they have to be motivated to play well after what Nebraska did to them. I think they could maybe get back to the way they played against at Oregon. And I think they put the pressure on Penn State and win it. I don't
Upset
think it's
alert.
high scoring, though.
Upset alert at all? Oregon at Michigan, Indiana at Michigan State?
Keep an eye on. I think I like Michigan State. I think Jonathan Smith has got them headed in the right direction. Indiana has had 2 big back-to-back weeks where a lot of people are talking about them. They still have, Michigan, and then in a couple weeks they have Ohio State. Could this be a letdown for IU where it becomes a 4-quarter game? The Northwestern, that trip to Northwestern got into the 4th quarter. And then Indiana just had too much firepower. I could see this game going into the 4th quarter, but I don't see an upset in either one of these games.
What's the line with Michigan and Oregon?
Minus 14.5.
See, that
Oregon's favorite. That's a lot.
I'd like Michigan to be able to cover. I'm kind of with Gary. I don't think they go win outright. I think Oregon just got too much talent, and I think if that game becomes close in the 4th quarter, like the number one guy right now probably in America I want with the ball in his hands is Dylan Gabriel. So whenever you have that, you have a trump card if you're Oregon. But I think Michigan's potentially good enough along the lines of scrimmage to be able to stay around, but they barely have a passing attack. Dylan Gabriel is fantastic. Like, that's why I like Oregon, but maybe Michigan to cover. I also just think that Kurt Signetti with his guys in there, I don't want to say they're immune to the look-ahead spot with Michigan State. I think Childs has been a great quarterback as of late for Michigan State, and he could keep them hanging around. But I think it's probably a similar story to what Indiana's had previously this year, where it's close for a half. 3rd quarter comes around, Indiana starts to take the game
it's back
for
in
their
quarterback
own, and they pull away.
IU on the road.
I still think it's the same story. I think those James Madison guys, we've talked about it, I think they know how to win.
I think they're having the darling season. There's always one that everybody's talking about for all the way through the bowl season. TCU was that a couple years ago. I think that's Indiana this year. I do like Michigan State more than I think Michigan is going to threaten anybody, let alone Oregon. I think Michigan might be on a very fragile footing right now with in the post Jim Harbaugh era, and they may be wondering if they made the right decision. I think that's how fragile it is.
They're wondering out loud.
Especially if Ryan Day just totally, redeems himself at the end of the month against Michigan.
Kind of a weird line. Minnesota's favored at Illinois, -3.
Yeah, Bielema has never lost to Minnesota. Fleck's never beaten Illinois. He's 0-3. I don't know. Minnesota, give him credit. PJ Fleck, for one of the rare times since he's been in Minnesota, trusts his quarterback. They allow Bosmer to do a lot of different things. Illinois is coming back from Oregon, where Oregon looked like the number 1 team in the country. I'll go with Minnesota to win on the road, pull an upset, become bowl eligible in Champaign.
It's funny. I'm actually with you, Gary, because if you watch this Minnesota team at the beginning of the season, different looking team now. They play with a bit of bravado, a bit of swagger. They kind of play like their head coach. I like that Minnesota team. I'll also say if you're Nebraska, I think you're glad you're not playing Minnesota this year, especially late in the year, because that Minnesota team is not a team I'd want to face. They've taken leaps and bounds as a football team over the past month or so. I like Minnesota too.
And PJ Fleck has probably promised all of his players that he'll take them with him, whatever job he tries to get in the offseason.
That win over SC really flipped it for him. Yeah. Iowa, Wisconsin, that is in Iowa City, -3. Hawkeyes, their offense, they've made the change at quarterback. That's spurred them on. Wisconsin, they may end up coming to Lincoln at 5-5.
I don't like Wisconsin's offensive line. I thought they really struggled, especially in the second half against Penn State. And I think Sullivan being a quarterback, got to credit Iowa's offense. They're averaging nearly 30 a game. 3 times they've gone over 40 points. Tim Lester was a really good hire, and that was with McNamara as a quarterback. Now, granted, Caleb Johnson, I think, has 47% of their yards from scrimmage. But now they have a mobile quarterback in Sullivan. I like him here today. I like him on Saturday night against Wisconsin. By the way, guys, how has the Big Ten changed? This is not Jim Delaney's Big Ten anymore. Remember when there was the unwritten rule? You don't play night games in November, maybe an exception here or there. Iowa's 2 November home games are both at night, Wisconsin and Nebraska.
Good on it. Let's let the world see the lovely, wonderful Midwest we're all so proud of.
I like Iowa big. Kinnick at night's a tough place to go play. Also, I think Wisconsin's offense plays right into the hands of what Iowa's defense wants to do. I like Iowa winning this football game big, not to mention the fact that change at quarterback, for some reason, tends to jumpstart your offense for at least a week. Guys tend to play with a little bit more pride with the new guy in there behind center. I like Iowa winning this game pretty handily. I'd put it somewhere in the 24, 28 to 10 type range.
Yeah, I think it's a home field advantage for Iowa. If they was playing in Madison, maybe I take Wisconsin, but I think Iowa, with the changes that they're making and the fact they have an offense for the first time in years.
Nebraska, UCLA -6.5. It dropped 3 points from 9.5 is what it opened with Sunday when we were talking on the Average Joe Sports Show live. And we invite you to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Give us a rating, give us some feedback. Appreciate that. 6.5. I think Nebraska covers that. I think Nebraska wins 24-13.
Why the movement? Is it the weather? I mean, is that part of the? I mean, that's a pretty big drop in that amount of time. So are they just expecting not a lot of points to be scored?
I think the line has corrected itself. There's a lot of power ratings out there that are more in line with a 6.5 point favorite instead of a 9.5 to 10.5. Because it actually, at some books, opened at 10.5, and people grabbed it right away. So I think it's kind of gone back to the mean of Nebraska is better than UCLA, but not according to the power ratings in Vegas at 10.5. I like where Schmidt's going. I also think this is going to be a slow game. Nebraska and UCLA don't run a ton of plays. UCLA kind of takes their time. They run one play, I think, every 28 seconds. I think Nebraska runs one play every 29 seconds. So the total is actually dropped as well. I think it's 24-14 Nebraska.
Okay.
I would go along with that score, but it's not going to be that close. I don't think they can score. It may be a touchdown.
Who are you talking about?
Well, yeah, but I just don't believe in UCLA's offense, and I do believe in Nebraska's defense. And it could be a game that is within or thereabouts close to whatever the number is, 6.5. But I think we're going to go. That game wasn't close.
I'm going to make my prediction with an eye on the weather and say it is going to be a rainy Saturday at Memorial Stadium, and it's going to lead to some gross offense. Give me Nebraska 14, UCLA 10. A cover for the Bruins in a gross football game because of the weather. That's my take.
UCLA's -7 in turnovers. So if it's wet, they might have -7 on Saturday.
Fair enough.
That's code for Bills going to the sports book Friday. I like it. Appreciate you all.
The Warhorse Casino in Lincoln.
Schmidt, what's your prediction here?
I said 24.
Okay.
20. What did I say? 24-13. That's what I said.
I don't know if you said. Did you say that out loud or did I miss it?
I'm not listening to me either. Okay. It's okay. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Thanks for tuning in to the Average Joe Sports Show. Back at you, normal time, 10:30 Sunday for the Average Joe Sunday Live. We'll talk to you then.